Aloha, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Soul Talk, where I have another beautiful guest, and I'm so excited what we're going to talk about because it's a couple of very interesting topics. But before, I'm going to introduce you, and we're having today Nichomi Higgins. I'm so happy that I got the name right. She's a best-selling author and licensed psychotherapist with over 15 years of experience. Nichomi has successfully transitioned from her corporate career, love that, to holistic wellness, helping women of color thrive. She has helped them create a life and do and yes, that's it. It stops there. But yeah, you have helped them create a great life.
Yes.
We will probably get the rest when we're
the rest.
when we dive in. But I just had the very first question was, tell me the story behind your name.
So, okay, and it is a story. So, I am born to amazing parents who had me as very young people, young humans. And when they were young and in love, they were watching this little Christmas cartoon about three bears. And it was a mama bear and two little bears. And one of the bears her name was Nichomi, and the other was Chinook. My sister's name is Shannon, and so her nickname used to be Chinook. So they saw this cartoon and they were like, oh my God, we're going to name our daughter Nichomi. Later, my mom fell in love with the poem. I think it's Little Hiawatha, and Nichomi was the moon goddess. So that was that further confirmation of like, yes, this has to be her name. And so that's where my name comes from. And I don't know too many people in this world I only know one other person with the name Nichomi.
Oh, I love that so much. It's so beautiful. And especially I love the part with the moon goddess because I have a very good connection to the moon. So that resonates.
Same. So, it's funny how our names, when they're just kind of chosen out of fun or love, can also hold a lot of meaning for us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's how for my name is a whole extra story, but I think I'm gonna make an extra episode about that. But I love when names have stories because it's so beautiful. We connect so much with them.
Yeah. And so my name has been one that I've actually grown into. I think at first my nickname was Nikki, and I think this is actually really relevant to the conversation, because in some way, shape, or form, because growing up, I thought my name was too complicated for others. And so I would always go by my nickname, Nikki. Oh, just call me Nikki. And I realized that by doing that, I was dismissing a very important part of my self-acceptance and my identity. And so now I prefer to go by my name, but it's interesting how in little ways I guess maybe in little ways we take away our own shine, if that makes sense.
Definitely, because like you said, it's so intertwined with who we are, with our identity, and it's so important to allow us to shine with our whole being.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Tell us a little bit more about, your whole transition, because I think that's an interesting part, and I love when I see people who have actually done it, because I feel that a lot of people are, on the brink, and especially with everything that was happening in the last 2 years, I think some people, took the strength to actually make a change like that in their lives. But how was it for you? Because you probably did it before the whole change.
Yes, I did. And it was a little scary. So for me, I have, and this again, this kind of ties into my name and my experience with my name. But for me, I've always been drawn to or known on a deeper spiritual level that I was to do work that allowed me to impact lives in a way that felt really good and honest to me. And I always say that I am someone who is very familiar with pivoting, because if it doesn't feel good for me, I will pivot, despite the fact that even the pivot is really, really uncomfortable and scary. So I had a long corporate career and decided, okay, I'm going to move into, mental health and helping others, because that felt like the most accessible way to help. And as I began to really do that work and climb those ladders and make a name for myself, one of the things that became painstakingly clear was that I wasn't happy or fulfilled. Yes, I was doing the work. Yes, I was doing a great job, but I had had this history of pouring myself into my work, thriving on the outside, not being happy within, not feeling like I was really being true to myself. And I had reached a place in my career where being in that pattern, in that cycle, so often I had gotten to a place where I was saying, enough is enough. It's time for me to make some shifts. It's time for me to make some changes. Um, and that awareness that starting my business had always been present, and it had just grown louder and louder and louder. And every time that I found myself feeling like I was doing less meaningful work, or I wasn't truly giving myself permission to explore my purpose, that voice will grow louder. And so I had gotten to a point where the depression, the anxiety, the lack of fulfillment, all of it had become so much that it was like, if I'm going to save my life, I need to just take this risk. And that's what I did. I started my business about a year prior to leaving, and eventually transitioned. But for me, it was really a matter of mental and spiritual health to make the move.
Mm. I
I said a
reson
lot.
I resonate with that so much because it was exactly the same for me. I had a huge, corporate job, and it was like, for the outside, probably it was great, but for me, I was really, really depressed, and like
Mhm.
not being motivated with anything. And I needed to,
Yeah,
have that look inside myself to be
yeah,
able to say, okay, so what am I here for? What's my real true
yeah,
purpose?
yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's when you find yourself, I tell a lot of my clients, or have told my clients, when you find yourself in that position of feeling like you have to choose between your well-being or your livelihood and what feels right and feels good, it's really, really scary. But you also have people on the outside saying things like, how are you going to leave that good job? Or they're looking at you to be an executive, and this is everything you've worked for. And so it creates so much resistance, and such a very intense inner dialogue that's rooted in fear, that you also are exposed to, or at least I was very much exposed to, how much I didn't trust myself,
Hmm.
and that was really scary too. And so, um, I am thankful though for making that shift, because while I thought I was just shifting into, hey, I'm going to start my own business and this is how I'm going to serve and help others, what I actually stepped right on into was a spiritual awakening, um, a very intense journey of self-development and releasing and pruning, that I just could not, I had no clue that's what I was actually stepping into. And so the woman that I am today versus the woman that I was when I started this journey, it really has been profound in a lot of ways.
I love that because it takes us on our own journey, starting, I mean, overcoming the fears, doing it anyway, in spite of having
Yeah,
those voices saying, no, no,
yeah.
don't do it.
What are you doing? You're risking everything. And you're like, am I? I thought a moment ago I felt really confident that this was right, but now I don't know so much. So yeah.
Yeah. I remember my sister actually verbalizing it to my parents when I was saying that I need to leave the job where I'm at. And I'm definitely, when everything was already in place for me to leave the corporate world. And I remember my dad asking me again, like, are you sure you want to leave this job? And before I could even answer, my sister just put in, she was like, if she doesn't, she's gonna die in the next couple of years. We're not gonna
Thank you,
have her.
sister.
Yeah.
But I think, literally that's how real it was for me as well. I tell people, or when I share my story, something that I often share is that depression came into my life at a very, very young age. Existential depression. What is my purpose? What am I here for? What is my meaning? I have no meaning. I have no purpose. So it entered into my life at a very, very young age. And as a result of its presence in my life, I created this kind of instruction manual, or this belief system to survive the fact or live with the fact that I didn't really have those answers. So I sought achievement and success and anything that allowed me to tangibly demonstrate my value and contributions to the world. It didn't necessarily answer the question, but it allowed that depression to feel less intense. Unfortunately, I started to teach myself a language, right? And I started to coach myself according to that language. And I started to think in ways that said, if you're not doing X, then you're not important. If you're not doing Y, then they're not going to see you. And all of those things really contributed not only to the decline in my mental health when I made the decision, when I realized it was time for me to really look within and make this decision, but it also contributed greatly to my spiritual, my physical health. So there were a lot of things that were happening as a result of this kind of survival manual that I had put together for myself, that yes, when it was time for me to pivot, it was a matter of like, I'm not gonna be here if I don't make a decision. So yeah.
Yeah, and I always wish and hope not for everybody to have to make that decision.
Yes.
Because it's not easy, but I mean, or at least do it earlier before it's a life and death
Yes,
matter.
that part. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think when you get to the life and death, it's just you only have one way. Because I
That's
feel
it.
that most of us were never gonna say no to, like no to life. We're just gonna
Yes.
go ahead and do it.
Yes. And I think, everybody's journey is their own. And so I learned to understand that my journey is what shapes me as a teacher in this space. And so maybe we had to get to that point in order to also show up in the spaces that we're showing up in order to really connect on that empathic level.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing because we've been through that. We've, like when you have been through that, how
You can
your
hold it.
client feels and you can hold it for
Hmm.
them. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
especially also, be kind in the moments where, because I
Yes.
feel that, I mean, my podcast is called Serve Your Energy Wave because I feel all of us, we have these waves of energies going through us. And sometimes we're in the wave of doing, and now, okay, now I'm going
Yes.
to break down all the doors and, go through there. And then sometimes I'm not. And in those moments, usually, 'cause I feel that we tend to, judge ourselves. Either
Yes.
you're lazy, you can't do this, you're never going to change, and we go into that spiral that's not going to be helpful,
It's
right?
not. It's not. It really opens the door for that fear to come in and re-expose us to the stories we're healing from, right? And so you're absolutely right. You're so right. There are moments when I'm like, I could take on the world, and the other I'm like, I want nothing to do with the world. I just need to be alone. The world
Stay
can
out there.
leave me alone.
Stay out there. I don't want you.
I don't even know why I thought I could work. Yeah.
And it's good to know because that way okay, now I'm a little, what's it called? Do you guys know those snails with the little houses? It's like I'm in my snail house right now.
And and it's so funny you say that because I'm also very interested. So I'm an empath and I'm introverted. So yes, there are those moments where I'm like, I love everyone. I want to be, and then I'm like, oh my God, if I don't go hide, I'm gonna break down.
um what's coming up right now, because I know you're specialized on, hold on, let me say that right, because is it BIPOC? Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
because I know
yeah.
what that, Black, Indigenous,
People of color.
people of color. Yeah, there you
Yes.
go. But I've only, like I only know it because I've read it because I'm more on the European side of the
Yes.
world. But
It feels more American.
yeah, but I feel like I watch this because I know that if I would be living in the US, I would not have the Caucasian label. I would have I don't know, I don't even know what they would write in there because I have an Asian side and I have a Latino side as well as my German side. So
Ah,
where do I fit?
well, and that's what's hard about that particular label sometimes is yes, we're varied, but that you would fall in there. Now, I do think that I don't know if we will be able to find a box though for you.
No, but yeah, that's why I've always been interested. And my family, I have family in the US, and we also have people of color in there. And of course, I mean, my aunt is fully Latina, but and,
Yes.
and colored a little bit.
And I think
Yeah.
some people out here go towards more indigenous when they're very much appreciative of their indigenous roots. They prefer to fall within that category. And then there are others just like, I rather kind of just fall in the people of color because I represent multiple cultures. And so it's very interesting here in America and the ways in which we are all trying to find our spaces and create spaces in which we can be acknowledged and seen and heard. And I think like every journey, it is one that's evolving.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, for me, I'm not a fan of labels, but I like them sometimes to explain things. Like for us here in the podcast, we have the label of empaths because
Yes,
it explains of, a part of us, but it doesn't
I
mean that I have
agree.
to, fully identify with that.
I agree. And it's so hard for me because when people ask, so what do you do? I get like anxiety because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's actually a really big question because it can vary. Um, but I think that we live in a time where younger people are bringing to our attention, um, how important it is to appreciate the variety and the complexity of who we are as humans. And so I do think that, labels and groups are being created. And I think some of us older folks in America are trying to make sense of that versus just really be curious and lean into it. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how we are versus other continents, other countries.
Yeah. No, but that's why I love what you do even more because I feel that it's also all about representation,
Yeah.
having someone who can coach me with the thing as a multicultural person. For me, it's always I don't want to label everything, with the different cultures. So I've gotten to
Yeah.
a point where for me it's different values, you
Yes.
know
I like that. I
but
love
you
that.
right, and you understand the values of black people coming up or
Yes.
indigenous people coming up, because I feel I see a lot of similarities, within everyone else that is not Caucasian.
Yes. Yes.
To put it this way, and this is not, I'm not going, I don't want to separate anything, or I'm just trying to, sort of make sense of it, because I feel that, like, especially when I look at, because, I've grown up in in both, all three cultures, and having, seeing how the Germans, for example, are with their people, it's a little bit different than
Mhm.
having, a loud Latino mom, or or a very
Very true.
right, or a very reserved Asian family going,
Yes.
um
Yes.
but I feel that especially nowadays, when you watch all those TikToks or Instagram reels of the people making fun of their own culture with how my mom treated me when I was a little kid, and then you start watching them and they're like, they are also showing the same things, like
You're
they
like,
all
my
have
mom
the
does that
yeah, they all have the
too.
flip flop, the throwing flip flop.
Yes. Or doing the hair in the morning. I'm like, oh my goodness. Yes. But I
Exactly.
think, something that um I think the reason why I made a decision to, and I work with all women, but I honed in on women of color, primarily because when I did work in corporate America and in leadership, I was more often than not one, if not the only one of very few.
Mm.
And there was, um, because of that lack of representation, I didn't always feel understood. I didn't always feel like my experience was being accounted for. And as I moved into leadership, I also recognized how apparent it was that there were conversations that were happening that were not inclusive. There were conversations that were happening that were very much um, rooted in biases and unconscious biases, and people were not aware of how those belief systems and attitudes were influencing cultural norms within a company, within a team, an environment, et cetera. And so as a leader of color, it was really important for me to not only educate, but to demonstrate, right? But while doing all of that, I was also experiencing, as a Black woman, you can't be an angry Black woman. So you have to be careful on how you communicate your concerns, or you have to be very understanding, and you almost have to have that kind of motherly, nurturing presence. And all of these stereotypes were showing up in corporate America that were causing me a great deal of stress, that were preventing me from really embracing my identity. And so I realized, if I'm going through this, then there are other women who are going through this. And so when I started my business, and I still do to this day, I worked predominantly with women of color in leadership.
Mhm.
Whether they were leading their own businesses or leading within companies, it was creating a space for them to explore their own inner narratives, and also those external messages that were preventing them from really showing up in a way that felt good and aligned to them. So I do, while I work with and hold space for, all people and all women, there was an understanding and a need that I wanted to address.
I love that too, because I mean, not only those kind of stereotypes, but you also have. I tell me, correct me please if I'm wrong, but I feel that's one of the things. For example, on the German side, if you do therapy, that's okay,
Mhm.
but on the Latino side, it's like, no, we don't do therapy.
Exactly.
And I feel that's a huge difference. Also, I mean, I've
Yeah,
heard also in the Black communities, like, no,
it's
we
the
don't do
same.
therapy. You just have to deal with it.
Suffering in silence, right? You figure it out. And so you get to a point where you're saying, you know what, you don't have to do this alone. Allow me to, through my own personal experience, my education, my expertise, allow me to hold space where we can have really dynamic conversations that feed you in a way that feel good, and that also give you space to release, um, beliefs or narratives, ideas, traumas that are, again, preventing you from really experiencing a more um, joyful life. And so the work that I have done has been really, really beautiful. But it's work that you come into contact with people who are tired, and people who are also wanting to understand what their purpose and the meaning of, their work is, etc. So it's holding space for those conversations too.
Yeah, it's like we were saying earlier, I think before we started recording, when you're burned out on it, is it because you're just, doing too much, which sometimes is the case, but a lot of the times it has to do with the purpose in what you're doing.
And I think, yet, I think it's important to distinguish that for people too, because you are absolutely, right. Yes, we can get burnt out when we're doing too much, but that's actually really easy to fix, because typically it's like, okay, what can I stop doing? What can I prioritize, etc. It doesn't mean that there might not be some wrestling that comes up with that. But when you're feeling burnt out and you're not aware that it's because the work that you're doing or how you're doing that work doesn't feel meaningful, that can be really, really scary for someone to sit with. Because again, if it's just a matter of, oh, I'm doing too much, let me pull back. Okay. But when it becomes, but what if it's because I'm not happy? What if it's because, I don't feel like I'm doing work that has meaning to me? That can definitely inspire someone to become very reflective of what is happy, what does happiness look like for me, or what does meaningful work look like? Or, and this is what I've experienced in my work, it can cause someone to become very, very afraid, because the question is, I've built so much of my life doing this. What does something else look like for me? And that's when the fear can start to come in.
And I also think one more thing where people are afraid of is actually admitting to themselves that they are,
Yeah,
because it is a form of depression. It is a
it
form
is.
of depression.
It is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Every time that I've experienced burnout prior to making the decision, and I even experienced burnout in my business, and I can talk a little bit about that, but every time I experienced burnout, it checked all of the boxes of depression.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
it's exhausting when you're doing things that you don't actually want to, that you have to. It's like whoever comes up with the next task, you're just gonna jump in their face. Why do you
Yes,
need this now?
yes, yes, yes. And I think too, something that I have been really reflecting on, depression is very complex because there are forms of depression where, because it is biological, you can feel very powerless to it in a lot of ways, the symptoms of it.
Yeah.
But burnout is what I like to say an invitation. When we are experiencing burnout, it is in fact an opportunity to really reflect on what's happening. How did I get here? What is potentially causing, what am I doing or not doing? It really is an invitation to begin some deep reflection. Oftentimes, when we experience that burnout, it's how do I solve this and get through this and get back to whatever I was doing because I need to get all the things done.
Yeah.
And so, again, we're missing a really, really beautiful opportunity to recalibrate, to connect with ourselves, and really explore whether or not we're really on a path that aligns with us, or if we've veered off. And so I think the more that we can kind of say in safe spaces, I'm feeling burnt out, we can also expose ourselves to that reminder. Because if we don't, we're going to go to, I got to get all the things done. How do I fix this? Um, and really, what I think we're being invited to do is just pause.
I love that you're mentioning that, because I feel, at least, from when I had because me too, after, after leaving the corporate world and being self-employed, it happened too, because you sort of like start going like, and you're so excited, and then you start doing so many things, and then it's like, okay, okay. But I love how our body sort of, shows us in a way. In my case, one of the symptoms, I'm going to call them symptoms. One of the symptoms typically is I have a task I don't want to do, because it's like, oh, I have to, because maybe a client told me, or I've decided that apparently I have to do it for my business.
Yes. Yes.
The shoulds.
I, I have been there.
Right? And so you don't want to do it. So I'm not. No, no, no. I'm gonna give myself 5 more minutes on Instagram Reels, or I'm gonna give myself one more episode on Netflix, or something like that. And then it ends up being the whole evening, and I end up like at 2 in the morning, going like, "Oh man, now I have to do it real quick."
Yes. Oh my goodness. That has
And,
happened so much.
right? That's like, and then you do it at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're so exhausted the next day, because of course, you didn't get to sleep out, and
Yes,
but the moment that happens, is like, that's a huge sign, that's a huge red flag to, take a moment and look at it.
it is. And can I be honest with you? Because I've had that happen way too many times. When I experienced burnout in my own business, I almost had kind of a freak out moment because I was like, holy crap. I literally left a thriving career to start my own business because I was always feeling burnt out. And now I'm feeling burnt out in my business. What am I doing wrong? What is happening? And I realized, and that's why I say it's an invitation to really pause and reflect and reorganize, because I started to realize that when I was experiencing burnout in my business, it was because I was doing things that were not aligned with my vision. I was doing things to honor whatever the world of business tells you should be doing. And so,
The
yes,
shoulds.
all of those shoulds, and those ways to all of those things that was like, none of this feels right for me, and yet I'm trying to stay, I'm trying to do it all, and I'm becoming more burnt out because this isn't for me. And so, yeah, I have been there. And I'm like, why does my business feel like a job? And so
Yeah.
it's a great, it can be scary, but I'm hoping this conversation can help people realize you're okay.
Yes. Yes.
You just need to pause.
Definitely. Especially to all our solo and entrepreneurs out there. One of the things that I've noticed, I know marketing works and everything, but
Yeah.
I've been through I think 4 or 5 online course, business, or was it online business schools that told me so many shoulds, and I know them all by heart. But
All
they
of them.
didn't, they didn't help me because I was, like you said, I wasn't aligned with them. And
Yeah.
instead of burning myself out with all those methods, like what all the things that I had to do, it was really taking, like you said, taking a step back, regroup
Yeah.
with yourself, take
Yeah.
a moment, take a breather,
Yeah.
ask yourself, is that really necessary?
Yeah. Does this really work for
Yeah.
me? Am I having fun? Something that I've really in the last 2 years been um really, and I support my clients in looking at this as well, is, are we having fun? And what does fun look like? And if we're not having fun, how can we integrate it? Because the answer may not necessarily be, oh, go leave and start your own business. That's not for everybody, and it shouldn't be, right? But how are you incorporating things that you enjoy into the work that you do? Because naturally, that's going to make it your own. That's how we're going to season our experiences and other people's experiences of us when we're incorporating ways to have fun, or the things that we enjoy about that work. And so um it it takes reflection. It takes reflection. And we have to give ourselves permission to take the time that is needed to give ourselves quality reflection, because I think a lot of times, again, when we're in survivor and do mode, we're looking for the hacks, and we're going to get a whole lot of hacks that don't necessarily work. They just add more work to our plate.
No, and especially I feel like, because the thing is that once we change the job, or or whatever change we make, we always take ourselves to the next place. So,
Yes.
right, because all the beliefs and all the
Yes.
programming that I had before of, all the shoulds again.
Yes.
To me, sometimes, because I've been watching people, separate from, let's say, maybe of the dogmatism of the church, because I have to
Yes.
do this and have to do that. So I don't want that anymore. So now I'm going to become a yogi. And then they
Yes.
start becoming a yogi, and then in their yogiism, they go like, yeah, but you have to do it this way, and you have to
Yes.
do it this way. And it's like they just shifted the same belief into
Everything.
into that other thing. And I remember I read one coach here in Germany. I thought he had a beautiful post, and it was so awesome, because he was like, so when he was so stressed out at his work, so he started meditating. At first it was just 5 minutes, then he would move on to 10 every day, and then 20, and then 30, and then up until he was by 2 hours, 3 hours meditating each day. And then he suddenly realized he's just doing the same that he was doing at the
That's
corporate
it.
place, just more and more and
Yes.
more, until he just released it and went down to not meditating, but being mindful in a different way. And that was
It's like, when I tell you right now, my heart is hugging you through this screen, because I always tell people, you take you with you wherever you go. And so you have to not only care for yourself and love yourself and heal yourself and honor yourself, but you have to understand how you're taking you with you. Because I do see a lot of times in this, as the world is becoming more focused on wellness and mental health and spirituality, they're bringing a lot of perfectionism to it. And they're bringing a lot of beauty, like you have to have this beautiful meditation space, or you have to have this pretty journal. And it's like, when you really think about the essence, and I see you laughing, so I know you. I think we're creating barriers to um really what are supposed to be really simple experiences, right? And so I agree. it's interesting, and I find myself just taking it all in. And trying not to do so with judgment, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, I know there are ways that I'm still growing, but I do see it a lot. And I remind my community and my clients all the time, you take you with you. And so you have to be aware of what parts of you you're bringing along in certain
Yeah.
space.
It's basically what helped. One of the things that helped me was starting to get a more minimalist lifestyle because of that. I mean, in my case, it was because I transitioned into a nomadic lifestyle, so
Mhm.
I need less because I want to be ready to just get my one bag and move with that one. I'm not there yet. I still have one room of things, um, but anyhow, when you use that also with yourself, it's like this internal decluttering of, do
I
I
love it.
really need all the, like you said, the journal or the I don't know, man, what I mean, I'm my basis, and I had a shamanic that my spiritual path began with a shamanic I learned to be a shaman.
Mhm.
And I remember I had the drum for this, the rattle for that, the candles in that color, and even within all that, and I'm grateful for that very first teacher that I had, because from the beginning he said everything's energy. Like, if you don't have it
Everything.
with you, you need you, and that's the only thing you need, and that counts for everything.
That is that, like, everything you just said really has touched my heart, because I myself have found I believe that I'm in that space of really embracing simplicity and what that looks like as a mother with two children and a husband who's an entrepreneur and all of these things. But it's like, even if I can't necessarily um disrupt too much of their lives, how do I find my most simplest inner space? What does that look like for me? Um, and how do I want to cultivate for me? And I've definitely been exploring that for myself from a spiritual level. I'm not a religious woman. I'm a very spiritual woman. And that has been a lot of decluttering, on a spiritual and emotional level, just saying, this is, I believe that I have a connection to something greater to me, and I will simply nurture that, has been, oh God, okay, it's simple, right? But I do see the value in that. And yes, I see other people kind of exploring what that looks like for themselves as well.
Yeah, because I mean, I was brought up by a Catholic grandmother. She would be sitting in her room in the afternoons praying, and praying was her thing, reading in her book. And I need to go, but I remember, and that was because I've always had, like, I Catholic and Christianism. I'm really fine with the belief. I just have a problem with the
Yeah.
institution. That's
Hmm. Same.
and I remember I remember I had to pick up my grandmother from her mass, and I pick her up, and she was like, "Hey, can we go by?" I think she wanted to go to Can we go by Walmart real quick? Because I need to buy black shoes. The priest said I need black shoes, and I'm like, "What?" He was saying, apparently he said that they're only allowed to come, or they're supposed to come with black shoes to church, and I'm like,
It's a lot. I have a Catholic grandmother too, and if she were to hear me say what I just said a moment ago, she would just be like, "Oh, Nick, no, we cannot do, we cannot do that." But yeah, I agree. I think, for me, I would say my growth, and even the work that I do, um, but more importantly, my growth and my understanding of purpose, and my understanding of how I am to serve, really did become more clear when I gave myself permission to just settle in my beliefs. Um, and by settle, like, just kind of be in them and let them, as you continue naturally to cultivate your relationship and your connection spiritually and energetically, you're also learning a whole lot, and being awakened to a lot of truths that are really profound in a lot of different ways. And so um, I really am happy that I made the decision to just be in that space because I'm a seeker at heart.
Yeah.
I'm a learner.
Yeah, me too. I'm completely there with you. I believe that all of us are, finding this, are trying to go back to that connection, to put it that way.
There you
And
go.
I feel that when
There you
you
go.
when you start opening yourself up in general to religion, to philosophy, you find that all of them are so, they all have this s- similar ideas and energies of where we come from, where we're supposed to, what are we supposed to do here on earth.
That's it.
And it, in the end, it doesn't matter if I'm praying to God or if I'm, you know I remember I was writing down some blessings that had no, no religion.
Yeah.
It was just a blessing, and my grandmother came in. I remember, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm writing down some blessings. And she's like, I thought you didn't believe. So I really
Yes.
fought her on the church thing.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, I do believe. And the important thing is that we believe in something that is out there and that it's taking care of us, right?
And I agree, and I think for me and my identity in this space has been just that, right? I can call upon the goodness of something greater and share and even be a vessel of that goodness, right? Just in us having this conversation, we're clearly being used in a way that's not only enlightening and growing us, but someone else who listens to this. And we have to trust that process. Of course, there's a lot more to it, right? But I say to a lot of people that there is freedom and liberation when you can just give yourself permission to be curious and what that looks like for you. Because whether it's the Bible or everybody, we all have the same capacity to experience these awakenings and this information. It's just not all of us believe it. And so you're right. We are definitely returning back to a state of awareness. And so my hope is that I can, in my work, help people see that connection um, and be curious about that connection instead of that rigid, what are the answers? I have to have the answers. I have to know what comes next. I
Yeah,
don't
I know.
know. It can change. Be
I know.
curious.
I know. But I also love that we're living in a time where this shift is happening, that a lot more people, at least that's what I feel, and especially now having all these
I agree.
conversations for the soul talks, I feel so much of us are, because one of my ideas in my process, and I feel like for you, it's the same for us, it's, holding the space for our clients to actually, find themselves without us, we're giving the tools that they can use if they want to, but,
That's kind of the space. Yeah.
yeah, right? So it's like, okay, here are some tools. You can create your own if you want to out of
Yeah.
all these, or create new ones, or whatever you want to do with it. But we want you to feel safe, and we want you to
Yes.
listen to yourself, because it doesn't matter what other gurus or coaches or
Yes.
even ourselves are going to tell you. You have to
Yes.
feel it for yourself.
Yes. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. My hope and my hope in the work that I do is that I can be allowed to be a vessel that is able to hold space for people to develop greater self-trust. Because that's what has been ultimately compromised. When we came into, my dad said something really powerful and it always stuck with me. When we came into this world, we knew who we were. And when we came into this world, I mean, our souls, right? I want this time and I want this day and I want whatever it is that I'm going to experience in this world. This is what's going to happen. And so when we came into this world, I think we had a clear sense of who we were. But as we continued to engage with this world that is very much operating in disbelief sometimes, it began to rub off on us.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and so I strongly believe that that's actually a new thought that I really like that thought into journal. um, but I strongly believe that what we are really returning back to is a state of self-trust
Yeah.
and knowing. And I think people are ready,
Yeah.
or I think they want it. I don't know. but I do think they want it. So,
No, but we can get them there if they want to with us, right?
if they want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this funny little meme of this little girl in a teacup, and it's like what I thought my awakening would be like, what it's actually like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the latter.
It's a ride. It's a huge it's a roller coaster, but hey, it's worth it.
It's worth it. It is worth it. It's that releasing, right? I think that's what when my clients are saying, why is this so hard? I'm like, we don't even realize how invested we are in some of the stories that we've needed to create in order to survive in this world. And so our awakening is trying to free us and liberate us from those things. And a lot of times we're doing so with resistance because they are safe, familiar blankets. And so it's like, give yourself some grace. This is not supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's not supposed to be easy, but it's supposed to be what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think it's also, like we said earlier, it doesn't have to happen overnight. Don't stress
At
yourself.
all.
You're
That part.
perfect the way you are. And if you're taking a day or two longer, it's okay. You don't
That
know why you
part.
might need that day or two longer.
That part. And again, I remember when I was like, I gotta get this together. I've gotta conquer. And I'm like, oh my God. 7 years later.
Man, I remember, I mean, my beginnings of my spiritual journey, I think it was 2008 was when I started with my first shamanic teacher. And that was like, it very quickly went into the brink of 2012, because 2012 was supposed to be this huge
Yes.
date, and something was going to happen. We knew it
Yes.
wasn't going to end like Hollywood wanted us to believe, but it was something was going to happen. And I remember things going through like, they're going to be 140,000. They're going to need 140,000 aligned people to shift the energy of the earth. And if you're not there by that time, you're not going to be part of the whole thing, and I'm saying it in this way. Back then, that was a truth for myself, right? And it was like, why can't I, enlighten faster?
Yes. But I do think a lot of people are still in that space. And so so here's something that I'll only speak to my own personal experience. Something that I noticed because of my eagerness to get there is an impulsivity that was happening. And the minute I would have a moment of aha, I was like, now what do I do with this? How do I share this? And that was a part of my growth because the universe was like, no, you're still missing it. You're still not getting it. But this very interesting impulsivity would happen versus me just marinating and allowing myself to be exposed to what is supposed to be revealed next. And so, yes, I can relate to that intensity of, I got to get there. But it's as I've matured on this process, I've become more at peace with the knowing that timing is such a gift. If you can just trust that whatever is will be, there is a great deal of peace. But that was also a journey.
I'm completely there with you, because it's like, that's one of the things, when people ask you, you're getting older. And I'm like, I love getting older because it makes me wiser. Because now I've done so much transformation that I'm sitting there and going, oh, another, because I feel we're always in transformation. We're never going to reach the enlightenment. At
Constantly.
least I don't
I
want to,
agree.
because for me, it feels like the moment I'm enlightened, I'm going to leave this plane and probably have to come back in another round.
I agree.
So right now,
I
I'm
agree.
just, surfing the ride. I'm happy with whatever fears and, old thought patterns keep coming up. But whenever there is one, it's like, okay, thank you. Now I see you. That's good. Now we can start looking for a solution.
There you go. I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm actually getting quieter. That's where I kind of struggle with like social media and things like that, because there was a time when I wanted to say everything and share everything. And now I actually find myself being more intentional, and just being. And so that part of my being sometimes bumps up against this I don't even want to say sometimes, pretty much every single day, it's bumping up against a world that is saying, give me more, show me more, talk to me more. And I'm saying, I just want to listen. I just want to see. I just want to engage. And so, yeah, it's been a interesting, there's, like you said, there's transformation constantly happening.
Yeah.
And so those thoughts are going to always be coming in.
And it's beautiful because then we, like I said, we can be friends with them and then
That's it.
tell them in a nice way, there's the door.
Yes. Not now. I can't have you right now. Like right before we got on the call, I was looking at everything that I needed to do, and the chatter started, and I have this beautiful view of the mountains right now, and they're covered in snow. And I just was like, oh my God, if I keep listening to these thoughts, not only am I going to not fully be present and absorb the goodness of our time together, I'm going to be like a wreck. I'm just going to spiral. And so I turned away and I just looked at the mountains and I was just breathing, and I felt so much better. So I'm thankful for that moment.
Oh, I love mountains. I mean, I'm more of an ocean person, but I feel the strength. I mean, I was born sort of in between because I was born in Ecuador, so I was born close to the ocean, but also close to huge, volcanoes
Yes.
actually.
Yes.
So, but then and where I'm living right now in Germany, we are very close to the Alps, so you can actually, when there's
Oh,
good weather, they get so with because of the warm
they're
air.
magnificent.
It's wow. It's
Yeah.
always such
Yeah.
it's like they're always there, the rock.
Yes. That's how I'm about trees. Trees give me a greater sense of understanding. I love trees.
Yeah, because they're strong, standing,
They're strong. And I always just think
grounded.
about what it took for that tree to become what it is, the stature, the stillness of it. And so it always gives me a sense of perspective.
That's so beautiful. Because we were talking about, your work, can you tell us a little bit about, what does the work with you for your clients look like?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I don't currently work with clients on an individual level anymore. Now it's more so workshops. I do a lot of speaking, and I'm an author. And so I write my books. And so the work that I am doing, again, it's with women who have a vision, the desire to impact, to contribute, and to do good in the world. And yet, despite this vision, they're wrestling with themselves in some way. They're wrestling with the belief system. They're wrestling with fear. They're wrestling with overthinking. There are different things that are happening. And so the work that I do with them is to really hold a space for them, not only to explore those narratives that are keeping them from fully showing up and expressing that feeling in their spirit that is saying, that's really what I want to do. I really want to do that. Not only do I help them explore, but I like to say I teach them the language and the posture of self-compassion and curiosity. As someone who has and is healing from years, being in a relationship for years with symptoms of depression and the thought processes, what has brought me greater peace is loving and being kind to myself and learning that language.
Hmm.
And also moving through life with a sense of curiosity and openness versus that rigid, I have to know, I must know, it's got to look this way. And if it doesn't, am I a failure? And so I teach them that posture and that language. And of course, they take that posture and language and make it their own in a way that feels right for them.
That's so beautiful. So we're gonna put all the links down here for the book
Yes.
too. So whoever's out there and resonates, we're gonna put everything there so you can check it out and you can read the book and you can,
Thank you.
yeah, see if you can, attend one of the workshops if you
Yeah.
like. It was so beautiful. It's really, I love how,
Ditto.
I'm so grateful to the universe that it's allowing me to do these because I'm meeting so many wonderful people and you're on top of the list. It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much.
Ditto. When I tell you my heart is like it's at peace and it's smiling right now, the space that you have held for this conversation has been wonderful. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Do you have like one last message or words for our audience out there?
You know, something that I always end with the hopes that it will seed whatever needs to be seeded, is you are and have always been good enough. And if the audience can hear my words and really sit with that, then I hope that seed flourishes the way that it's supposed to.
I love that. I'm not even going to add much to that. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much. Take that seed with you to all of you out there who have been listening in. Thank you so much for listening in. And from me to you always, keep surfing your energy wave. Thank you so much to you too. Bye, guys.